Hey, you're back here on Lit Sports Online, and we got our fight action we're talking about again. Pat and Justin on the set for you here on Lit Sports Online, and we're going to start with a UFC 231 recap here. I want to start with the prelim card because there's an interesting fight on there. There was Nina.ansaroff getting the nice victory. You wanted to talk about that one?
Yeah, I thought that nina.ansaroff looked phenomenal. She's going up against Claudia Gadelha, who is typically one of the top 3-4 girls in the division, who is challenged for the title a couple times, and I thought that Nina.ansaroff was the underdog coming into this fight, and a lot of people thought that Claudia Gadelha was going to do what she said she was going to do and be able to close the distance, take her down, and dominate on the ground, but that's not what we saw. What we saw is a Nina.ansaroff that had a much improved stand-up game and controlled the distance of the fight, and just was able to run away with a kickboxing kind of clinic and take the victory against a much higher ranked opponent, pushing her towards the top of the division. It was a great night for Nina, and I'm glad to see it. It's kind of a changing of the guard. It's very exciting to see where she's going to go from here.
Okay, well, it's nice we got an upset on the prelim card that was worth talking about, but let's get on to the main card. We'll start with there was a match, a light heavyweight fight between Jimmy Manawa and also Thiago Santos. That one ended in a knockout. What did you tell us about that one?
It was complete chaos. It's two guys who are known for just heavy hits and knockouts, and I kind of said last week this is going to be an exciting fight. It's just going to be fireworks the whole time, and that is exactly what it was. They both came out swinging heavy leather the entire time. Both guys dropped the other guy a couple times. We saw Santos get the first drop and had Manawa in trouble. Then Manawa recovered and dropped Santos, and just back and forth the whole time. And eventually Santos pulled out the victory with a brutal knockout early in round 2. And as much as it sucks to see one guy lose in a situation like that, where it's such a fun fight and both guys really just throw it all out there and do what they're known for, it was an exciting fight to see. I'm happy for Santos. He's moving towards the top of the division, which will be fun. I personally would like to see him matched up against Anthony Smith next. I think it would be a good kind of figuring out the top of the division fight, but it was an exciting fight, everything I expected it to be, and I would not want to be anywhere near that at any point in my life.
Well, I think it speaks a lot about the endurance of the two fighters to be knocked down more than once each in the fight and keep on going.
Oh, yeah. To be able to take a shot like that from such a big dude, I mean, you got to remember they're light heavyweights, and they're both, like, jacked, and they're 205 pounds. These dudes are not tiny guys, and they hit hard as hell. And so either guy being able to recover from a shot from the other is just astounding.
On to our next fight, a welterweight matchup between Alex Oliveira and Gunnar Nelson. Now, this was one that ended in submission. What do you got to tell us about this one?
I was really excited to see what Gunnar Nelson was going to look like coming back. He's a training partner of Conor McGregor. He's been out for a little while, and he's a phenomenal grappler, and he showed that in this fight. But not only that, he came back from adversity. In the first round, we saw him get taken down, and we saw Oliveira land what Gunnar Nelson said is a shot to the back of the head. It looked more to me to be kind of like right behind the ear, which is not an illegal shot. He said it kind of took him the whole first round to get his bearings back, and so we saw Oliveira on top of him for the whole first round, landing some pretty big shots. And it was looking kind of bad for Gunnar Nelson in that moment. Then he came out for the second round and was able to get his own takedown. He was able to full mount Oliveira, and he landed an absolutely brutal elbow right to the forehead of Cowboy Oliveira and completely gashed him open. The blood just started pouring out. I think what happened is as soon as that cut hit, he started bleeding all over the place. Oliveira, as soon as he saw all that blood, kind of turned over to get away from, more shots because there was another elbow right after that. And as soon as that happened, Oliveira gave up his back. Gunnar Nelson took his back, sunk in the choke, and the fight was over. It was bloody, brutal, but absolutely efficient by Gunnar Nelson.
Moving on, we got the women's flyweight match. This was the championship, right?
Yes.
Championship match. Women's flyweight, we had Valentina Shevchenko and Iaquinta. Probably messed up her name again.
The last name was right. It was just Joanne instead of Yana, but it was good.
This one went to a decision. What's your analysis of the fight?
It was pretty one-sided. You could have scored the fight 50-45 for Shevchenko. You could have scored it maybe 49-46, giving Joanna 1 round, 2 tops. But it kind of went the way I was expecting it to go. It was Joanna being a little more aggressive, but not being able to actually close the distance enough to land anything big, because Valentina Shevchenko is a bigger woman, and she's more powerful. Her strikes have more oomph to them, you know. And she also got a couple takedowns. So Joanna typically has really good takedown defense against your typical like wrestling takedowns, your single leg, your double leg, things like that. But Valentina was either catching a kick and then getting a trip, or she was getting in and using kind of an upper body kind of body lock in a Greco-Roman or judo kind of throw from there. And so Joanna wasn't able to defend the takedowns as well as we have seen her in the past. And so Valentina was able to use kind of a better counter-striking game, heavier shots, and more takedowns to kind of control the distance of the fight, to control where the fight took place, and kind of cruise to a pretty one-sided victory, which it is great to see, because Shevchenko's been a woman who's fought for the title. She's been at the top of the division, a weight class up in bantamweight at 135, and she dropped down to flyweight at 125, which is her more natural weight class. And it's good to see a woman who's been so phenomenal finally get her hands on the title. It also is kind of bittersweet, because Joanne Jędrzejczyk is one of my favorite fighters on the roster. She's former strawweight champion, one of the most accomplished women's MMA fighters of all time, and to see her in the position that she's in now, where she's lost 3 out of her last 4 fights, all of which were title fights. I hate to see it, but I like to see Shevchenko get the win, and so I'm not sure where Jędrzejczyk is going to go from here. I'm not sure if she's going to stay at this weight class, where she seems a little kind of outmatched in size and power. She's very quick, so she's able to throw a lot and stay kind of busy, but she seems hesitant because she's afraid of the kind of the repercussions of that bigger shot from the bigger woman.
I mean, do you think she's losing a step at all, or is this just a matter of like being matched up against tough opponents?
Kind of a little of both, almost. Rose Namajunas just seems to have her number at strawweight. Rose is a phenomenal fighter. She's a phenomenal grappler. She's a great striker. She's got a completely different striking style from Joanna, who has kind of your very aggressive Muay Thai kickboxing style. And Rose is kind of unorthodox striking and a better ground game. So I think Rose has her number. And I think Valentina Shevchenko is kind of the same, just happens to be a kind of similar striking style in Muay Thai and kickboxing, but she just has her number. They fought 3 times in kickboxing. This is the first time they fought in MMA. Joanna was going out there looking to kind of put her stamp on it and say, I can beat this woman, and just wasn't able to pull out the victory. And I kind of saw it coming, and like I said, it was just Shevchenko was a better counter striker, had heavier shots, and had a more varied game and controlled where the fight went, got some more takedowns, and was able to control her a little bit on the ground. And I think Joanna just got overpowered and a little outclassed, and yeah, she's looked phenomenal against everyone not named Valentina Shevchenko or Rose Namajunas, and she had a win in those 3 fights in those 4 fights where she beat Tecia Torres, so she's still a phenomenal fighter. It's just I'm not sure if she's losing a step or if these 2 women just are a little too much for her. We'll see going forward, I guess.
Okay, and then moving on to our main event that I know you really wanted to talk about, the Featherweight Championship. Max Holloway and Brian Ortega. This one ended in a knockout in round 4. What's your take on it?
So it was a super exciting fight to watch, and it was a masterful performance by Max Holloway. It was so like I talked about in the preview video, the way to beat Brian Ortega, who has kind of heavy strikes and an absolutely phenomenal ground game and submission game, being a super high level Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt, the way to beat him is to really control the range of the standing game in order to control if he gets takedowns and to land shots from outside the range that Ortega is comfortable with. we've seen Ortega get a couple kind of big shot knockouts in Frankie Edgar and Clay Guida, but they were all kind of like on the inside, where he landed a knee on Clay Guida as they were kind of infighting in the pocket, and Guida went to duck a punch, and Ortega landed a big knee on him. We saw Frankie Edgar where he landed a big elbow to start it, and then as Frankie was rushing in, he landed an uppercut. But Max Holloway was just able to control the range of the fight with better footwork, a busier punch rate, faster hands, and just better control of the range. And it was absolutely ludicrous, like how many shots he'd landed. He broke all sorts of records in this. He landed 307 total strikes in 4 rounds before the doctors called the fight off in between the 4th and 5th round. He landed a record-setting 290 significant strikes. That is insane to me. He actually took the lead from, I think, or joined the top total strikes ever with Frankie Edgar and Michael Bisping, 2 guys who have had more octagon time than almost anybody else and are not known to be finishers. Whereas Holloway is not only landing an absurd amount of significant strikes, but he's also finishing people. He's getting them out of there before the decision comes, which is crazy because he's putting in far less time and landing far more strikes. The rate at which he lands significant strikes on people is baffling. Not only that, but it gets worse as the fight goes on. So if we look at this last fight, the first round he threw 84 punches, landed 40, so it was almost 50% landing rate. But in the second round he threw 126, landed 66. So threw more, landed more, and a better landing percentage, right? So he just sort of figures you out as he goes on. Third round, it looked to me, one of 2 things happened. Either A, Holloway got cocky, I mean, kind of rightfully so at that point, and Ortega started landing more punches, or Holloway was going in there with the intention of being a little less elusive and trying to see exactly what Ortega was trying to throw at him. You know what I mean? To try to see exactly what Ortega's idea of, if he was allowed to move forward and throw those shots, what was he going to do?
Now, when you say that he was controlling the range of the fight, are you talking about like, he was keeping him at a distance where he couldn't get in close to like land big shots, or like what exactly was his strategy?
That's exactly right.
But yet he was able to land a bunch of shots from the outside.
Yeah, so Holloway has a longer striking game. He's able to keep Ortega at kind of the end of the punches. So he lands the punches out here with his arm kind of straight, and then is able to slip outside with a little bit of head movement and a little bit of footwork, where Ortega tends to throw a little bit rounder punches. And so his he likes to throw hooks where they're kind of, your arm is bent a little bit, so the guy has to be closer, whereas you throw that straight, it's right there, right? And so so Holloway is able to land those peppering, they're not huge power shots, but he hits you with so many of them that it just wears on you. And that's actually what happened, is eventually Ortega's face just couldn't take it. One whole side of his face was so swollen shut that the doctors were like, we're not going to let you do this anymore. This is done. And so, and not only, he keeps you at the end of his punches, but he also is so good at cutting angles. So he moves in to land a couple punches and then turns his way out. And so, if he comes in here, he might switch stances and, pivot his weight off his front foot, so that instead of coming in from here, he pivots, and now he's over here while you're still looking for him over there. Because he lands punches on you, and while you're trying to cover up to get away from those punches, he pivots his weight and turns, and so he ends up on the other side, and then he lands a couple more before you even figure out what's going on and can back out of there. It's a beautiful thing to watch. It's what makes boxing so great, and that's what the greatest boxers do, and he is one of the best boxers in MMA right now, without a doubt, especially after watching that performance. And the craziest thing is that he, like I said, he keeps getting better as the fight goes on. In the 4th round of this fight, he threw almost 200 punches and landed 134 significant strikes. That is crazy. I haven't been hit in the face 134 times in my life, and he did that to one dude in 5 minutes. It was absurd.
Well, when you put it like that, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. It was a masterful performance. It puts him at the top of that division for sure. I think he is the best featherweight of all time. Whether or not I would say the greatest in the sense of what he's achieved and accomplished in the weight class so far, I think Jose Aldo still has just his run was incredible. So I think if you're talking about anybody, it's those two. A lot of people like to throw Conor McGregor in there just because he beat Jose Aldo, and his run was great. Don't get me wrong. Holloway's and Jose Aldo's, I think, is better if you look at their resume. But the other thing I want to say is that Brian Ortega, as outclassed as he got on the feet, it was still a phenomenal fight for him. He exemplified an incredible amount of grit and heart. He did not want to stop the fight. The only reason the fight got ended was because the doctors would not let his face take more punishment. Rightfully so. But Ortega is a monster. He was still going out there, still throwing bombs, still trying to finish the fight, still trying to get takedowns, still going for submissions. I think he's got a super bright future, and I'm excited to see where he goes from here. There's a lot of talk about one or both of those guys going up a weight class. We'll see what happens. I don't think Holloway needs to. I think there's a huge benefit if he does, but I don't think he should feel pressured to by any means. If he wants to stay down there and cement his place in that weight class, I say let him do it. Not that there's many people I think that can challenge him at this point, but why not get a couple more wins before you jump up and start facing your, rematches with McGregor and Poirier and your Tony Fergusons and your Khabib Nurmagomedov, your Kevin Lee. They're just bigger dudes, different Shark Tank to swim in. But nonetheless, he's one of the best of all time, and it was a super fun fight to watch.
Moving on, we want to talk UFC on Fox 31 that's coming up. So our preview of this card. So what are we talking about here?
So we got a shorter main card than normal because it's on Fox on cable. So real quickly going through them, we got Jim Miller versus Charles Oliveira. Two guys who are phenomenal on the ground, great submission artists. Jim Miller is kind of a super gritty, just bite down on your mouthpiece, keep your chin down, and come forward and brawl. Charles Oliveira is a little more of a range striker, a little more of a Muay Thai kickboxer. So it's an interesting clash of styles with two guys who are great on the ground, so I don't think we'll see one guy run away with it in any position. I think Jim Miller's super gritty, so if Oliveira is able to pepper him with some shots, he'll still keep walking forward, so it should be a fun fight. After that, we have Rob Font versus Sergio Pettis, and what's Pettis' return to the 135-pound weight class in bantamweight. And before he went down to flyweight, I think he was at 9-1 in this weight class. So I'm excited to see what he can do. Rob Font's kind of a heavy puncher, finisher, bunch of knockouts. Pettis is kind of like his brother in where he's a really good stand-up fighter, but he's not, that giant power. He's kind of going to throw a lot of really quick, really precise strikes and great ground game, just like his brother. We'll see what happens. Then moving on to the co-main event, another fight where it's two stand-up fighters. We got Edson Barboza, whose highlight reel is insanity if you watch it. He's won fights by body kick, by leg kick, by head kick. He has the craziest wheel kick knockout I've ever seen in my life. If you get the chance, please go just type Edson Barboza versus Terry Edom. That wheel kick is insanity. Versus Dan Hooker, a guy from New Zealand who's up and coming. He's got a couple knockouts, and they're throwing him to the. He has to be thrown to the top of the division. He came out after his last fight and he said, "You guys are getting these boys hurt. They're not on my level. Give me somebody on my level." They gave him the top of the division. He got what he asked for. We'll see how it goes. He's a great striker, great fighter, power in his hands. But like I said, he got what he asked for. Not sure how advisable it was, but we'll see. And the main event in a rematch of Kevin Lee versus Iaquinta, we got a former title challenger versus another former title challenger. Kevin Lee kind of earned his way there. He fought for the interim title against Tony Ferguson. Good striking, decent power in his hands, great wrestling, great takedown game. Versus Iaquinta, who's one of the toughest, grittiest New York badasses you could ever ask for. He fought Khabib Nurmagomedov on 20 hours notice and went the entire 5 rounds with him, unlike Conor McGregor. So there's a lot of talk about how crazy tough Iaquinta is, especially in reference to that fight. When you look at, a lot of people consider Conor McGregor one of the best out there right now, and then you look at the fact that Iaquinta, who's like 11th or 12th in the division, went the full 5 rounds when Khabib finished McGregor. There's something to be said there, I think. So, a lot of exciting fights.
So why is Iaquinta so ranked so low in the division then?
He just doesn't have the resume to put him at the top. He doesn't have the wins over the high-ranked guys. He has a win over Kevin Lee a couple years ago, but they were both much younger. That was when Kevin Lee was first kind of getting into the UFC, and Iaquinta just has some losses to the top-tier guys. He kind of gets his way towards the top of the top 10 and then usually ends up with a misstep in a fight and kind of falling back down a little bit. I mean, but he comes out of a great camp. He comes out of Camp Serra-Longo, which is the same camp that Chris Weidman comes out of. So they know how to train champions. Matt Serra himself was a welterweight champion with one of the greatest upsets of all time against George St. Pierre. And so there's nothing that says that Iaquinta can't get to the top of the division. He just needs to string together those high-profile wins, and if he starts here, he will be towards the top of the division. And I say if he beats Kevin Lee, he's maybe one more fight away from a title shot.
Okay, well, that does it for our preview and our recap videos this week. Make sure, remember, you can watch our videos on thisislitTube.com as well as read our articles, and we're still, of course, on YouTube with a LitTube channel. So stay tuned, keep watching, and this was Lit Sports Online. Make sure to subscribe and like the video.
Alright, UFC, homosexual stuff. Wait, no, Pat doesn't like that. Badassery, take one.
I don't like that
rolling in
either.
5, 4,